Welcome, dear friend. This is the Medium's Harvest, and this is day 32. We are in a 90-day journey with Emmanuel in the book that was written in Portuguese titled Seara dos Médiuns. And this book is quite deep because it develops the teachings that were brought by Kardec in the Medium's book in 1861. 100 years later, Emmanuel brings to us the deepening of the messages that were brought by Allan Kardec, the spirits, through the mediums that Kardec studied and researched through. Today, the message is about an unforgettable medium. Who is he? Who is he? It's not quite about being unforgettable, but what he did. Before we go to the message, let us understand why Emmanuel is bringing this medium as a reference for us. When we go to the medium's book, chapter 21, item 231. Chapter 21 of the medium's book is when Kardec discusses the influence of the surroundings of the medium, the environment, the ambience, and how that affects the mediums. Emmanuel, tonight, we're going to read his message, which is a dissertation that was inspired in one paragraph. When Kardec asked the spirits, in item 231, question 1, do the surroundings in which mediums work exert any influence on the manifestations? Answer. All the spirits who surround mediums help them either for good or evil. Okay, there is more than just this item, but Emmanuel is relying upon this answer, in which we get to know that the spirits who are connected to the medium somewhat exert an influence on him for good or for evil. There is no neutral. So first of all, it's important for us that there is no neutrality, okay? So there is no such thing, who am I? I'm a nobody in somebody's life. No. Either I am a good influence or I'm a bad influence. Not only for the discarnate spirits, we need to ask it for ourselves. Am I being of a good influence in somebody's life? Or am I being a negative and evil one? Am I being constructive or destructive? Good or evil? The neutral position does not exist on the earth, in the universe. There is no such thing as this person doesn't impact anybody in any way at any level. That doesn't exist and will never exist. Because as Joana de Angelis says in the book Happy Life, you may not know it, but you are an example for someone. So we need to ask ourselves, before we are concerned if spirits are of good or bad influence in our lives, we need to ask if we are of good or bad influence in somebody's life. And that doesn't mean we're going to kill ourselves if we discover that we are not being constructive. That's not the point. But we need to adjust. We need to face the reality and make adjustments and learn, seek the good, be constructive. Now, back to Kardec. He was asking if the spirits play a role, the ones that are surrounding. And you're saying, yes, they do. Do you place much importance on the environment where you live in? Do you think the environment where you're living in is an impediment for you, for your progress? Or is a reason why you're progressing? Why are we asking this question? Because it's exactly at this point that we will understand why Emmanuel, reading, studying with Chico Xavier and others, he brings to us the following dissertation. So again, Kardec asked, do the spirits that surround the medium play a role, have an influence over? Does the surroundings of the medium play a role? And the spirits answer, yes, they do, either for good or for evil, constructive or destructive. Why is Emmanuel bringing a model for us? You answer to that question when we finish Emmanuel's dissertation. Emmanuel then, inspired by question, the item 231, the question and answer in paragraph 1, he titles chapter 32 of the Medium's Harvest as Unforgettable Medium. There was a meeting on May 6 of 1960. Studying mediumship and environment, let us remember one of the unforgettable mediums of the apostolic days, Paul of Tarsus. Around him, everything was against the light of the gospel. The shadow of fanaticism and cruelty had not only settled in the Sanhedrin, where the court of mentors and friends were situated, but also in him, transforming Saul of Tarsus in a dangerous instrument of persecution and death. Paul injured, humiliated, and insulted all those who did not think through the same principles that guided his action. But his mediumship unfolds unexpectedly. He sees Jesus coming back and hears his voice. Terrified, he recognizes the deceptions with which he had lived. However, he does not waste time in useless lamentations. He does not succumb in desperation. He does not engage in the exuberance of self-condemnation. He does not escape the struggle for inner renewal. Then he realizes that he cannot at first receive the sympathy of Jesus' spiritual family. But Paul does not feel as a failure. He observes the extent of his errors, and he does not surrender to empty remorse. Paul of Tarsus undertakes with sacrifice the journey of his own renewal. In order to do so, he does not claim the cooperation of others. Instead, he prepares to collaborate with others. Paul finds immense difficulties for the illumination of the soul. However, he does not despond within the struggle. According to the faithful words of the New Testament, Paul was flogged and imprisoned several times for the love with which he taught the truth. But in contrast, in Laconia and Macedonia, Paul was considered to be Mercury incarnate and the servant of the On High. However, he does not feel overwhelmed by the flogging or confused by success. He tolerates assaults and praises as the righteous debtor, interested in redemption of his own accounts. The good news also says that God wrought wonders through Paul's hands. However, he himself claims to bring with him a thorn in the flesh, which compels him to live in permanent atonement. And while in the body allows him, Paul bears witness to spiritual reality, combating ignorance and superstition, wickedness and pride, temptation and vanity. No easy gold, no privileges, no social goals, no political support. Paul of Tarsus and the loom that helped him to survive were throughout the centuries a perfect symbol of personal influence and adversity, teaching us all, incarnates and discarnates of all times, that we can ask for guidance, speak of guidance, examine systems of guidance, but above all, we need to be the guidance of ourselves. Unbelievable. Every time we're really, it's, every time we read Emmanuel in this book, it makes us feel like when you are in the classroom and there's this genius educator, this genius teacher that amazes us every time we sit down to listen to his lessons. Many people claim that their environment is an impediment to their fulfillment of the duties. Many people, if not majority of people, they're like, oh my, things are not working well because this, that, and the other. Because of this, that, and the other. And Kardec asked this question in item 231 of the Medium's book. Does the environment, the ambience, really affect the medium? Yes, it does. But it doesn't imprison the medium unless we surrender to it. With Paul of Tarsus, we're going to learn a lesson. It's up to us to give in to the influence of the environment when it's not a positive influence, when it's a destructive influence. Yes, we agree. Walking on mud is not easy, but we can keep walking. Slower, but walking. It's not easy to exercise underwater, but it's not impossible. It's slower, the dynamics are different, but it is possible. So, it doesn't matter if I walk 10,000 miles. If that was my plan, to do 10 things, but circumstances are deterring us, and I make one thing, one step of progress is better than none. So our unforgettable medium is an inspiration to us. First and foremost, because he, not knowing he was a medium, he surrendered to the pressures, the external from others, and the inner pressure of the ego. He was almost failing. As Emmanuel says in the book, Paul and Stephen, he detoured. Yes, he did. Emmanuel uses that expression. Saul of Tarsus made a detour. The plan was otherwise. He made a detour. But when he figured out he was wrong, he did not stop, succumbed in desperation. So, friends, who doesn't make a mistake? Raise your hand. We all do. The question here is, what am I going to do when I realize I made a mistake? Paul of Tarsus is a model for us because he made a huge mistake. Immense. But when he realized it, Emmanuel says, he did not waste time in useless lamentation. A majority of people on earth are like this. You're like, I made a mistake, oh my gosh, and self-punishment comes through. And complaining, oh my God, what have I done? That doesn't change. That doesn't repair anything. Lamentation does not repair anything. It's a waste, he says. Paul of Tarsus does not succumb in desperation. He could. Like Judas, he succumbed to desperation and he killed himself. Paul of Tarsus did not. He does not engage in the exuberance of self-condemnation. So for us, we are being invited tonight to revisit our strategies of self-education when we realize we made a mistake, big or small. What have our strategy of education been? Self-punishment? That doesn't go to the right direction. It's useless. What does he do? He did not escape the struggle for inner renewal. Because when I punish myself for the wrong I've done, instead of moving forward, I imprison myself. I deter my progress. It's even worse. Because once I realize I made a mistake, I need the courage to correct myself. Think about a GPS. When you make the wrong turn, what does the GPS do? I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. GPS, don't say it. Just reroute. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I took you to the wrong detour. GPS, can you please just give me the new route? And the GPS is lamenting. That doesn't happen, right? Thank God. The GPS quickly reroutes, gives us a new direction, and we follow through and we correct ourselves. If a machine, if one app can do this, why can't we? With all the divine resources we have within. We just need to be quick, like the app of a GPS, Google Maps, MapQuest, whatever we want to use. Wrong direction, reroute. And that's what Paul of Tarsus did. Rerouted. He rerouted. He took another turn and said, wrong turn. It wasn't easy though. We wish it were easy. But he didn't waste time self-punishing. He didn't waste time with lamentations. He realizes that it's not going to be easy. That the people who now he want to mingle with are not going to accept him easily. And he understands. Do you remember when Paul of Tarsus first knocks at the door of the house of the way, where Peter is and the disciples? They are scared. You're like, oh my, I'm not so sure we should. Is he prudent? And he doesn't go to his inn thinking, you see, I'm trying to change and people don't believe me. No. He understands. And he does more. He does not expect people to help him. He wants to help people. So a tip for all of us in our daily lives. First for the self, Emmanuel is telling us, if I made a mistake and I find out, reroute, no lamentation, focus on it, understanding, and helping people in the trusting process, the regaining of trust. 2, if we want to know if somebody really changed, It's not that hard. We'll see that they are cooperative instead of asking for cooperation. I'll give an example. Somebody goes to jail and you receive a phone call as a relative. And that family member is saying, I've changed, I realize it's wrong, and I need your help. I need you to pay the lawyer, I need you to pay this, that, and the other. There you have it, the proof that that person has not changed. Because they are still thinking that people owe to them something for the mistake that they did. The day they call you and say, you know, I'm here, I understand, I'm subjecting myself to the correction of the moment, and I'm not going to ask for anything. And the days go by and they don't request the understanding and the cooperation. That's when they are giving a sign that potentially they've got it. I gave you a dramatic scenario, but it happens in our daily life. With little things, at home, at work, in our spiritist centers, in our spiritist movement, anywhere, in any community we partake, we're going to face it. And with Paul of Tarsus, it was not different. He undertook this with sacrifice the journey of his inner renewal. So he did not ask for people to give him anything. He followed the guidance within him. And there were no privileges. He quit social goals. He didn't demand any social support, and he didn't have any either. And there was no easy money, because he worked until the rest of his life. Not asking anybody to sustain his projects. And here goes one idea for us. I should not create a project expecting that people are going to financially support it. That's why in the book Disobsession by André Luiz, which is a guide to all those who would like to form a team of disobsession to work in the rescue work of discarnate souls, he says that those who are working at that level are the ones who should be financially sustaining the Spiritist Center. We may be open to the donations of the public, but never count on it. Like Chico Xavier never did. The day we start depending on it to fulfill our social goals, we're in the wrong direction. So now you can imagine how many things in the Spiritist movement are off track. Because people are creating foundations, are creating centers, expecting that people are going to financially bank it. And we cannot. Like Paul of Tarsus. He never did. He worked, and on the contrary, he helped others. And that's what Emmanuel is reminding us here. Paul of Tarsus and the loom that helped him to survive were a perfect symbol of personal influence and adversity. Of course, Emmanuel says his environment, everything in the environment was against the light of the gospel. It created apparent obstacles at first, but then one day he went back to track, calibrated himself, and continued. And in spite of the adversities, he was able to make it happen. So that teaches us all that we can ask for guidance, speak about guidance, examine systems of guidance, but above all, we need to be the guidance in our own selves. Talking about, because Emmanuel closes this chapter talking about how Paul of Tarsus became also an example of how to sustain financially his spiritual religious goals without demanding others to support and sponsor it. We need quickly in our spiritist movement around the world to adjust itself, for there are organizations, institutions that are being created counting on people's sponsorship, and that should not be quite like that. Otherwise, we are repeating the mistake, the ancient mistake of religious churches and temples, in which they create their churches and temples expecting that the public is going to support it. And that is a no-no. Jesus, as our guide and model, didn't do it. Paul of Tarsus, as the Unforgettable Medium, didn't either. So tonight, as deep as Emmanuel is teaching us, he's saying, no matter the hardships of the environment around, if we focus on what we need to fulfill, we will make it happen, but be prepared for the sacrifices. And if we're not seeing any personal sacrifice in our work, if everything is becoming easy in a world like nowadays, because we're not in Jupiter yet, it's a sign we're in the wrong direction. It's not a sign that the world is surrendering to it. It's a sign that we're working on the same old community, because there are people who are preaching to spiritists versus bringing it forth to the world, like Paul of Tarsus did. Right? So Teresa Castro is saying the rescue workers should financially support the Spiritist Center. Is this because these workers receive the most from the Spirit? Not only that, but because they are the ones who are committed with the mission of the center at the highest level. The directors of the center, which are supposed to be in mediumistic meetings. Thank you for asking, Teresa, but unfortunately nowadays we see spiritist centers in which their directors know nothing about mediumship, mediumistic practice, and they have never been to a mediumistic practice, and they don't even know how it works. And they're like, that's not my role. And they are administrating a center. They're on the wrong direction. Yeah, so we need to go back to the roots. Thank you for asking and for bringing that forth. And Emmanuel is bringing Paul of Tarsus as a reference for us. No wonder Chico Xavier would keep Paul and Stephen as his preferred book, and he would reread it every year. Believe it or not, he psychographed it, but we know he would reread it every year, and Divaldo Franco as well. And I've heard from the very mouth of Raul Teixeira that he also has a habit, or used to have the habit, of doing the same. So it's good, especially at this time of the year, to take that book and read it again. That's where we began our journey more than a year ago, doing our studies here every day, and we haven't stopped. It's been a year, and we began it with Paul and Stephen. Paul and Stephen is really a reference for us, and Emmanuel is really stamping it for us. Reference as medium, unforgettable medium. One that makes a mistake, but corrects himself. And when he corrects himself, he doesn't ask for people's understanding. He doesn't give in to the easy ways. He accepts the true pathway, the sacrifices, the hardships, and he does not confuse himself with the success when that happens. Remember when we studied about privileges, Paul of Tarsus never gave in to that feeling of vanity when he finally got to follow Jesus Christ. Right, sunshine? It feels like yesterday when we started it. I agree with you. Yes. Yes, Rudy, we're grateful that we're here together. You know, every night we're here, it feels like we're before this genius teacher. I'm going to repeat it. We should not take it lightly. The preciousness of these messages that Emmanuel is giving to us. It feels so vivid to us. And the question for us tonight is, are we truly reverent? Truly reverent to the hardships of all these people, including Christ, and first and foremost Christ. The hardships, the sacrifices that they endured, including Chico Xavier, to bring forth this message that is giving us life. And the question, we're receiving these talents. Are we just hiding them out of fear, or are we multiplying them? This is a question for us. We're receiving guidance, but are we being the guidance within ourselves? This is Emmanuel for us tonight. Let me say hi to our friends, Karina, Alice. Big hug to you, friend. Brianna and Nico doing beautiful works. Brianna, every day with the book Thought and Life by Emmanuel. Teresa Castro, thank you for your attentive questions. Andrea Torres, how are you? Rosalind Rosa, big hug to you and the whole family. Adilson, how are you, my friend? Raquel Bakeshi, Paula, how are you, Paula? Angelita, how are you, Angelita? Lea Severo, beautiful Lea, how are you? Narciso, my friend, how are you, my friend? Sunshine, how are you, Julija? How are you, Julija? Nora Brasil, La Souza, how are you? And Rudy. So friends, Unforgettable Medium, he comes to us as a reference. It's reachable. Some people think of Jesus like, oh, the bar is so high. Not quite. He came close to us, real humanity, as Emmanuel says in the Living Spring. But tonight, Emmanuel brings to us saying, he is a reference, Paul of Tarsus. So get that book back. I'm gonna get mine tonight again and start reading it again. To recall his journey and pay attention to his strategies of self-education. Not waste time with lamentation, not wasting time with self-punishment, and not surrendering to the easy comforts of life. Not blaming anybody else. He never blamed. Paul of Tarsus never said, but this is the way I am. Look, I am a Pharisee. What could people expect? He never said that. You see, I am like this because of my dad. Look at my dad. What can I say, right? It's my social group. Oh well, society, it's hard. What else? If he had said that, we wouldn't be here. He did the opposite. No excuse, no justification. And forgive me for the expression, but he really manned up. He was like standing up tall and saying, you know what? I should have known better. I was blind, but now I can see. I was blind, but I can see. Exactly. That is Paul of Tarsus. And he worked. As a weaver, He was weaving his soul externally and internally. This is us. This is us, invited tonight to keep weaving, to keep working on the tissues of our soul. Keep forgiving ourselves so we can forgive others. Self-compassion so we can be compassionate to others. And above all, loving ourselves. Mirror work. Remember, I love and approve of myself in ways that are pleasing to God. Don't you think God wants us to love ourselves in spite of it all? Why not? Right? Of course He does. What's going to happen tomorrow when we come back? Good question. Now Emmanuel, as striking as he is, chapter 33. What a number, huh? He talks about the non-believers, those who don't believe anything, and crucify Jesus. Yes, and he says, the non-believers, they are touching the darkness, which deepens their brain in lack of understanding. They become sour, irritated, and many problems come up. They lose their work, their help, their balance, their affection, opportunities, and time. What are we supposed to do when we are in a relationship or dealing with them? Right, friends? Tomorrow, come back, because we need to meet again this extraordinary teacher, Emmanuel. What a teacher. What a blessing. Right, Rudy? Thank you, Sunshine. Thank you, Rudy. Lisa Tellis, for your kindness, friends. Let us come back tomorrow. But in the meantime, let us practice during this day this self-love with the push that we need. As Emmanuel says in several messages, one of the expressions he uses the most, press on. Let us press on and keep on moving forward, one step at a time. Big hug, and until tomorrow, friends.